everyone, welcome or welcome back to my channel. This is Bookish Artist Mandy, and I am doing a little bit of a voiceover today for this new Benu pen that I got recently. This is the Benu Tribute, and I am just pulling all the stuff out of the box. And this one is in the model Swan Lake. Like always, it comes with your warranty and product care information. Your information just really all tells you kind of the same thing. Your diamine Oxford blue cartridge that I always set to the side. I do keep them now instead of just tossing them. And the pen, and just wait for this pen. Look at how beautiful she is. I am enamored with this pen. This one is one that when I saw it, it took my breath away. And then when I found out what it was a tribute to, which is Swan Lake, I had to add this one to my collection. It has just such beautiful iridescent shimmer opal pearl to it with that beautiful royal blue. And the nib I chose was a fine nib. And oh, so much sparkle. It really kind of makes me feel like winter with Elsa, if that's the best way I can say it. It's so funny because my husband goes, oh my goodness, that is an Elsa pen. But that is not the reason that I went with it. Although I am feeling very Frozen-esque lately. And I have found that I want to watch Frozen, so I've watched it as well. But regardless, that Swan Lake tribute is so deeply meaningful to me. And I am at the point in my fountain pen journey that meaning behind pens has become really important to me because I have so many pens at this point that I want to make sure if I'm adding one to my collection, there's a reason. So I set about trying to find so many different inks for people who are interested in this pen. So I hope you enjoy the ink swatching as I just kind of convey and tell you the story about what drew me to this pen and why I found deeper meaning in it. And also, like, just look at this pen. It is so beautiful. As apparently I spilled water on there, but that's beyond the point. Anyway, and I apologize if for some reason the sound picks up my dog snoring. Moo is sitting right next to me and just loving on me. So just letting you know that. So I thought about this pen and sent a message to Benu and said, this pen is absolutely stunning. I have a great idea for a video because of the meaning for it. Benu has wonderfully gifted me so many pens for my videos, and I so appreciate it. And they are such good pens that I love creating these new pen day videos for them. However, this one was just a little bit extra special. And I saw this one and thought, oh, I need to share this with the world. As I have spoken, this year has been really tough because at the beginning of the year, my dad was sick and then he passed away, and I've gone through the grieving process. And you have all been here through all of that. And with the holiday seasons coming up, I'm having a lot of emotions. I thought I had my grief under control, and then I realized you don't ever really have grief under control, if that makes sense. But I did want to explain that that's part of my life, right? And what I have appreciated so much is that people don't want me to shy away from who I am and the realness that I am over here living my life with my pens and my ink and my family and just doing life. And my pens and this spread have just so much heart for me. And so when I was a child, I was just head over heels for dolls and Barbies specifically. And I loved getting Barbies at Christmas. I got Barbies at Christmas even into adulthood, so it's not like something I ever really grew out of. I never grew out of my toys. I always had this kind of headstrong feeling of too bad you don't like it. And speaking of that kind of stuff, yesterday my son came home and I was watching Frozen 2 because I had just gotten home from work, and he told me, Mom, I like this movie. I said, yeah, it's a good movie. I was watching Frozen 2, by the way, because Frozen 2 is my favorite, personally. No shade to those who love Frozen 1 more. I love Frozen 2. And my son, who is the sweetest boy, has the biggest imagination, said to me, Mom, you're watching Frozen and I really like this movie, but Mom, I can't like this movie. And I looked at him and I said, well, why? Why can't you like this movie? It's a good movie. Well, Mom, it's a girl's movie. And I stopped and paused. I paused the movie and I looked at him and I said, Henry, buddy, I said, movies don't have genders. Do you like the movie? Yeah. Then it's for you too. It's not a girl movie. It's a movie. And so even at his age, his age of second grade and being with other people, he is learning that everyone has an opinion. And in order to fit in, you have to take that kind of criticism, but you don't have to. That's something that I am trying to instill in my children, because I always, even as a child, was so headstrong and knew exactly what I wanted for my life and who I was, and I was unapologetic for it. I may have been sad. We may have not always had the things that we wanted, but I had dreams, I had goals, and I knew what I liked, and nobody was going to make fun of me for it because I would tell them off. I was very much so. I told them off probably in not the best way. But that is this deep part of me, and Barbies and dolls have always been a deep part of me. By the way, this color is a pink, Swan Lake by Van Diemen's, but I did have to have it on here. And it's kind of reminiscent of the iridescent shimmer on the outside. But just so you know, it's the only pink that I put on this page. But I had to have a pink, right? But most of them really match with the pen. Van Diemen's Swan Lake, how can you not? Anyway, back to my story before I squirrel to another side moment. I just hope you're enjoying seeing all of the inks. I will explain the colors at some point, but the idea here is that I had this love, and my family always gifted me dolls. However, there were two of us, my sister and I, and my sister was the youngest and by far the pickiest, and she was very blonde, and I had medium blonde, light brown hair. So I always got the Teresa Barbies, and she always got the blonde Barbies. So she always got the Barbie, which was hard for me, and at the same time, I was okay with it. And there was this Christmas that we got these ballet dolls, and they had these beautiful long ballet dresses. And if you remember, I don't know if you do, but if you remember in the 90s, the ballet dolls, where they would have the ballet shoes painted onto their feet with legs a different color. And I had Teresa, and I remember she was purple, and my sister had the pink Barbie, and I was so sad. And then my mom got these really beautiful, I think they were from Hallmark or Avon. No, they were from Avon. They were Avon Barbie Christmas tree ornaments. And one was the, what was the Rapunzel, or another beautiful, I think I wrote it on here on this actual spread, but I can't remember. But my sister's was, might have been the Nutcracker. It might have been, but it was a beautiful blonde ornament Barbie that was pink, had this beautiful pink dress. It was blonde. And I got Swan Lake. I didn't know what Swan Lake was at that point because I was young. I was young. And she was this beautiful, darker haired Teresa with a bun, and it had her leg up, in the normal like pose that you imagine, with her arms over her head. And she had one leg that was kind of in that triangle pose. I don't know what the name of the pose is. I'm not a ballet dancer. But she had this beautiful silver dress, and it was so pretty. And we still have these ornaments, by the way. So I'm imagining them, but they're over at my mother's house, and we pull them out every year. And my sister recently, in the last 10 years, has tried to convince me that she got the Swan Lake one and I got the pink one. And she is sadly mistaken, because I do remember this. I remember this always because I always put my Swan Lake on there. I always loved her. I cannot wait until she's in my home, is where it comes to. But I let my mom keep them because my sister is still trying to fight with me on it. But she is not going to win this one. This one is mine. And I feel this so hard. And when I saw that this beautiful pen was named Swan Lake, it made me think about all of these pieces of me. And what is so beautiful is that even amidst all of this pain and grief and life, that I am keeping this story alive of my life. And I feel like stationery and this hobby and this community is so about us keeping record of something, even if it is just planners, even if it is just playing with ink. It is that beautiful analog feeling that we get when we put ink down on a piece of paper, when we put pens down on a piece of paper. And what is more amazing than finding stories that tie us to these pieces that we use? And lately, I have been really trying to go through my collection of pens and make sure that they all matter to me. And what I find with my Benu pens is that, for one, they're absolutely beautiful and a treasure. The stories that they have behind them are absolutely beautiful and such a treasure. But then on top of it, because of the way that they are and how lovely they are one of the pen that I reach for all the time. And this tribute model has even a deeper story. So it's almost like you're layering a story on a story and feeling all of those pieces that come together when you journal. And so that's one of the reasons, when I was looking at some of these colors, I decided to put them on this sheet with my Benu. I was really trying to figure out what pen would look great with the color of the pen, but also kind of feeling out how I want to use the pen. And I will say, I'm just letting you all know, I did pick a color, and I ended up, after 3 days, using the entire pen's converter, because I tend to do that with my Benus. And it is inked now with an ink that isn't even on this. But that's beyond the point. The point was, here I was trying to find different inks that I've had in my collection, and also that I think were different brands and different options. And most of them, if not all of them, are pretty easily accessible. So when you find a connection to a pen like this, you have options for inks. So that was a lot of my thought process on picking these inks. Was I didn't want to pick more than one ink from a brand. I wanted to make sure maybe I had a couple obscure ones, but I also wanted to make sure that I had ones that are really available. And so I went through this ink and I did think really hard on which ones I wanted for this video, because I know that I do these videos for me, but I also do these videos to share and hope that if something like this speaks to you, then you have options that might help you decide. So yeah, here are some of the inks that I went with. They're all really fun. I do think that a couple of them are more green leaning, or like bluish green leaning, than the pen, like Vintakislap would be. And I even think the Pannonia Danuvius Danube was, but I loved wearing Gul Tsukiyomi, and just considered hard for a while, even just putting Waterman's Mysterious Blue. But I did end up going with Dominant Industries Tanzanite, which is a pearl ink. It has this lovely deep blue shimmer, so I shook it, as you can see, and I did ink it up, and it performed absolutely lovely in this fine nib. It had no issues. It almost looks black, which is just lovely in and of itself. I will say that my sample from Venice didn't have a lot of shimmer, so the shimmer doesn't show completely, but it was a joy to write with, super wet, and an option for you if this is what you're going with for pens. And so yeah, I think that there's quite a few different options. I also didn't even put it on here because I already had a Sailor ink, but Sailor Urameku Kyoku, lovely ink and a great option. That's not what I ended up putting in this pen at all, but it is in another pen right now, so it is a wonderful option. Any of those Sailor Urameku inks are just so much fun to use. But yeah, I chose this deep story of Swan Lake, and while I was doing this, it's been a long time since I've actually watched pieces of the ballet and that I've read back up on the story. So if you're not familiar with the Swan Lake story and what the story entails and the moodiness of this pen for this cold winter, the Swan Lake ballet is a story about a princess who is so loved by this kind of warlocky guy, and he demands that this beautiful princess marry him, and she tells him no because she's not in love with him. And then, because he's jealous of her and he doesn't want anyone else to fall in love with her, he turns her into a swan by day, and then at night she turns back into a princess. So if you think of the other stories, even Shrek has taken from this. Shrek's Fiona turns into an ogre at night, and she will win her real form by her true love. And so this is kind of that kind of story is where it takes place. What I love about knowing Swan Lake is that it can have two different endings. It just depends on the person who is doing the Swan Lake ballet. They really get to decide, because while she is a princess, she falls in love with, I do believe it's a prince, I just know it's another man. She falls in love with him. Yes, Moo, I know, honey. She falls in love with him, and he falls in love with her at the same time. And when he finds out she's cursed, they go and fight the old man witch guy. I want to say warlock. Is it warlock? Wizard. Wizard. That's the word I was looking for. Sometimes words fail me. But they go and fight the wizard. And depending on who is doing the ballet, they either win or they lose, and the wizard wins. And so this lore of Swan Lake can either be a tragedy or a happily ever after, depending on which version and moderation you see. And it has been taken into so many different lores. I mean, there's even the Swan Princess, an animated movie that I grew up with. And so this fairy tale and story is just, it's so well known. And I am such a fairy tale lover. And fairy tales are something that have always been so special to me in my life. And I know they are to other people as well. And for some reason, and I don't know why, and I'm not sure if it is, and this isn't something I looked up. I didn't look up all the history because I think I could have sat and read about the Swan Lake forever, is that I don't know if this was a Christmas story or not. I do know the Nutcracker is a Christmas story, but I wasn't sure if this one is. But for some reason, Swan Lake makes me think of the winter, and it makes me think of just the uncertainty of winter. I don't know where all my viewers are from. I do know that I do have some viewers up in Canada and some friends up in Canada, and so they know it gets cold. It gets so cold here, and it's so unpredictable that you never know if we're going to have a freezing cold winter or if we're going to have one that is mild. And in the past few years, we've had some really mild winters, but it can get down to negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit with wind chills here. And that means we can't go outside. And so these cold, dark days just feel so long and unpredictable. And it's almost as if we can't leave our homes. And I mean, we can, because thank you, modern technology, but it is a slow time to really reminisce. And those cool colors and swirls in the pen also remind me of those dark winter nights. And winter just always makes me think of the holiday time. So this was one of those pens that also felt very reminiscent of winter for me and just felt like it needs to be a winter pen. And it also looks lovely next to my Celine Tribute, which made me so excited because if you did not watch that video, you will not know, but I had to get the Celine Tribute pen because Sailor Moon is based off of the princess Celine or the goddess Celine, and I had to have it because yeah, Sailor Moon's like life for me. And so are dolls, and so are these things, and they all kind of tie together for me and what defined my childhood. Maybe you're getting kind of an idea of the stories that shaped me as a human. I just urge you, if you haven't sat down to think about those things and the ways that you use your stationery and what stories shaped you, you might find a common thread in them that you can write about. And I love to think about those things as I am using my stationery more and more. And it is just so much fun to find the connections. Just like a story about a woman And I always love the stories about women who overcome and are really strong, and also tragic women. This story isn't necessarily happy. Yes, she falls in love and a prince comes and rescues her, but also it has a story behind it of how, men get what they want when they find a woman attractive. And that's something that has always hit me in a way of, well, I want to focus more on the girl, not necessarily how she's rescued, but the strength that it has to take in order to endure those moments of, well, I'm just living my life and now I am the object of somebody's affection and I don't want it. It's just, there's so many different layers and there's so much to be said there that strong women and women in general, stories about women and fairy tales that deal with women often getting rescued out of their situations are things that have always resonated with me in such a beautiful way. And so I love to sit down and think about these characters and who they are and remember their stories, because all of our stories matter. And oftentimes you can find a through line of the things that you love and the things that make sense to you. And so when I can sit down with this pen, it really makes me feel like I'm connecting to the deeper pieces inside me. If that makes sense to you, I hope that does. Because there are reasons we are connected to these things. I think I say this quite often, but there are reasons why we are drawn to the things we're drawn to. And sometimes it's just taking a step back and thinking on it and realizing. And one of the ways that I think about these things is by writing and is by reflecting and sitting down and saying, here is the through line. Here is the same connection. I am noticing the things that I love. I love this story about a woman who has to overcome her curse, but she overcomes her curse by being rescued. And it's a fairy tale, but we also don't always know what the ending is, because it can be a fairy tale that has a happily ever after, or it can be a fairy tale that ends in tragedy. And so that is an interesting thing, because when we go into kind of like the Disney-esque fairy tales, we're always expecting the happily ever after, and Disney has always given that to us. And that's interesting. And I think one of the reasons why it makes me think of Frozen as well is because Frozen was the first kind of mainstream. Maybe there were other stories, and I know there were, and other tales and things where, your main female, like the famous female, who could have been the villain had they kept the Ice Queen the villain, became a fan favorite. And even in the end of the second movie, she finds out she's the power that she has been looking for. And she doesn't end up with a prince. She doesn't end up married. She rescues herself and saves her entire kingdom with her sister. As important, because people are important and community is so important. And that's one of the things that I have learned even for myself, is that because of this community, I can sit back and say, this is why this pen is so important to me. And this is why I am doing this. And this is what's important. And this is what matters. And these connections that we all make, and just being so inspired to make connections. I hope that me going out and figuring out those connections for myself help you figure out what your connections are. So my kind of assignment for you, be it if you've made it through my video because I know I've rambled. I feel like I've rambled, but maybe it all makes sense to you, hopefully. But in amongst my ramble is that your story and what connects you to pens and sharing your story, even just with yourself, even in your planner, and what pens you use and what speaks to you. I'd love you to sit down even just for 5 minutes and say, yeah, there is this common theme, this common thread, this common story I am drawn to. Like, I'm always drawn to stories about sisters, which is not surprising as I have a sister, but I'm always also very heavily into stories that are slow and quiet, but profound when you have two friends and they're forming a bond that is very different, but it's very important. I think of things like The Animators is a book that I was so in love with a couple of years ago because it was a story of a female friendship in the animation industry. Highly recommend. But those are all little things that journaling and stationery has helped me realize. And so I am so happy to have this Swan Lake pen to bring me back to all these memories I had as a childhood of this time of the year. And it's really important as this time of the year has been, I don't know, it's a tough time. But I will say that, as I mentioned to Benu themselves, the Tribute model is so comfortable. And it has become, along with the Haute, my favorite model. I still like my Euphorias, love my Euphorias, but there is something so comfortable about the Tribute. And if you haven't tried one and you like the size of a Euphoria, but it might feel a little big, I'd say try a Tribute. And Swan Lake is a great one. But thank you so much for being here today in this time with me, listening to my story and my connection. And I hope that it has inspired you to figure out connections with your stationery. And if you are making a purchase, you're making a purchase like this with a pen like the Swan Lake because it speaks to you. Even if it is just, I really like those colors, and it's not necessarily Swan Lake, but the colors make you feel like this time of the year, fantastic. But as always, like, comment, subscribe. Links for the pen are down in the description. And I will see you in the next one. Thank you so much for being here. Bye.